It's why in my first week I announced a review of the pension system to unlock long-term patient capital for businesses. I'm determined to grow the economy.
Are you disappointed by those figures?
I'm not satisfied with those numbers. I want economic growth to be...
To be honest, it's hard for me to understand why the Labour Party still continues to go to interviews, because after every word they say, their reputation drops lower and lower. But they continue to give interviews as if nothing had happened, as if their deception had not been exposed. In this last conversation, Rachel Reeves was caught in a lie again, and she was severely humiliated. As always, she is confused trying to justify her actions, but it looks pointless. She really learned how to answer questions in the Starmer's style. In today's video, we will analyze her speech and also talk about recent news in the country. We're starting.
Chancellor, I want to start with what you said to the country back on June the 11th. Here's you.
I don't need to become Chancellor to know what a mess the government have made of public finances, of public services, and the fact that the tax burden is at its highest level in 70 years. We don't need higher taxes. What we need is growth. And I don't want to, and I have no plans to increase any taxes beyond those which we have already set out.
They swore that they would not raise taxes, but they brazenly deceived us.
Now, you specifically said you already knew everything you needed to know, yet on Wednesday you raised taxes by £40 billion. Why would a reasonable person believe a single word that you say in the next 15 minutes and that you'll stick to it?
I was wrong on the 11th of June. I didn't know everything. Because when I arrived at the Treasury on the 5th of July, so just under a month after I said those words, I was taken into a room by the senior officials at the Treasury, and they set out the huge black hole in the public finances.
I don't think she didn't know about the big hole in the budget. Their desire to win this election completely overshadowed morality and decency.
And so when I went into that budget last week, I had to put our public finances back on a firm trajectory, because we saw in the previous Parliament what happens when government loses control of the public finances. And the first commitment we made in our manifesto was to bring stability back to the economy. And that's what I did on Wednesday. OK,
but before we go on to that, let's just deal, frankly, with the arithmetic here. You say that they told you there's this black hole.
Yes.
By your own account, the difference between that was something like 9–10 billion.
Yes, there is supposedly no other way to improve the situation in the country, so they decided to hit and impose a tax burden on the most vulnerable segment of the population.
Let me break that down. The inheritance that we faced on the 5th of July was a £22 billion black hole between the commitments the previous government had made and the revenue they had coming in. We published on Wednesday, alongside the budget, the hundreds of line-by-line accounts of how that £22 billion is made up. In addition to that, there was the unfunded compensation claims that we need to pay for the victims of infected blood and the Post Office Horizon scandal. And then the third thing is that the previous government hadn't done a spending review since 2021. And so the outlook for public services, particularly our NHS and schools, would mean big cuts to public spending, and we would not be able to get those waiting lists.
I think that all the money that they will receive from our taxes will be just as lost as the Conservatives, given that they are all very fond of profit.
40 billion is choices that you yourself made, and I want to come back to that. But let me just ask you about the difference between before the election and after the election. For example, before the election, you voted for 2 separate cuts to national insurance rates. Now that you've seen those numbers, was that a mistake?
Well, they were sold on a false premise, the premise being that the money was available. The money clearly wasn't.
I think the Labour Party has a special style and image that they adhere to, which is primarily to change their mind every 3 seconds and lie.
At the time, you gave them hell over it. You said you shouldn't do this. You still voted for it.
No, I didn't. I supported those cuts to national insurance because they were costed and funded. But now what we find out after the election is that the numbers didn't add up because the government hadn't revealed to the Office of Budget Responsibility or Parliament the gap between the commitments they were making and the money they had coming in. So those cuts to national insurance were on a false premise. Now,
How absurd her speech sounds. Apparently she learned this from Starmer.
You won't be delivering any of it. Let's have a look at what the OBR says, that actually growth is going to go up a bit for a couple of years, and then it's going to settle, what, 1.5%. Actually, you've already failed. There isn't going to be the growth that you promised.
Well, I'm not satisfied with those numbers. Those aren't the summit of my ambition, but we're less than 4 months.
Are the OBR wrong?
Government. No, the OBR aren't wrong. They have factored in the things that we have already announced. But
this is a clear example of the fact that the disastrous budget that was proposed is indeed a tragedy in all plans.
That's why we've already published a green paper on our modern industrial strategy. It's why we are reviewing the planning system to get Britain building again. It's why in my first week I announced a review of the pension system to unlock long-term patient capital for businesses. I'm determined to grow the economy.
Are you disappointed by those figures?
I'm not satisfied with those numbers. I want economic growth to be stronger and faster, and I want it to be felt by people all around the country. Just a couple of weeks ago, Trevor, we hosted, let me just make this point. A couple of weeks ago, we hosted our International Investment Summit, and businesses announced £63.5 billion of investment into the UK. After the budget, another company, Prologis, announced £500 million of investment into a biomedical science park. I want growth to be faster.
What do you think about this interview? Reform UK is exerting a noticeable influence on the Conservative Party after record low voter turnout in the recent election of the Tory party leader, which ended with the victory of Kemi Badenoch. She received 53,000 votes, while her opponent Robert Jenrick received 41,000 votes. However, this election set a record for the lowest turnout and the smallest gap between candidates in the history of Tory party leadership elections. In addition, the number of Conservative Party voters has decreased by 23% since 2022, amounting to only 131,000 voters, compared with 172,000 previously. If Badenoch does not succeed as leader, discussions are likely to begin on the selection process for the party's candidates. In her election campaign, Badenoch promised to return the Conservatives to their basic principles and to review policies in order to create a new party platform in the coming months. A key task for Badenoch will be to restore support from Reform UK, which has been actively growing lately. As of the 3rd of November, 2024, the number of members of this party exceeded 93,000 people. About 4 million people voted for Nigel Farage's party in the recent elections, which significantly affected the results of the Conservative vote. Nigel Farage has appealed to Conservative Party members who support Jenrick, urging them to join him if they are disappointed with the results. He stressed that the Tories had made their choice in favour of Kemi Badenoch, not Robert Jenrick. Despite the fact that bookmakers mainly bet on Badenoch, her support among deputies took third place with the lowest result in the final vote, 34%. A YouGov poll showed that more respondents considered Jenrick to be the best candidate for the post of Prime Minister compared to Badenoch, although the majority is still doubtful. Also, 27% of respondents believe that Keir Starmer would be better than Badenoch as Prime Minister. Only 19% of Britons are interested in the election of the leadership of the Conservative Party, and even among those who are going to vote for the Conservatives in 2024, 52% said that it does not matter to them who wins. Moreover, 51% of respondents believe that the Tory party has nothing to do with the current political situation in the country. Share your thoughts in the comments below.